We're here to talk about Active Directory, and we wanted to put this in a way that hit more people than just your admins, even though probably most of you are admins or red teamers. So we decided to tie this to something we both care a lot about, which is actually Dungeons and Dragons. I've been a DM for a long time, been a player even longer, but myself, I'm Eric Kuehn. I'm one of the principal security consultants at Secure Ideas. I've been there 8 years, but before that, I was responsible for Active Directory at very large enterprise environments. Used to support one of the biggest in the world. We thought it was the biggest. The military beat us out, but hey, it's all right. Been doing it for before AD was actually released. And like I said, I like playing role-playing games. My kids are older. We get to play D&D together now. It's great. Ben?
So I'm Ben. I've been at Secure Ideas for since August. I've got about 10 years experience in offensive security consulting, did a lot of network adminning and things like that before that. A lot of you folks know me from back in my Sword and Shield days. I am also kind of like super hyper nerd, play a lot of D&D. I don't DM as much as Eric does, but I do like, the power gaming, and I have an obscene miniatures collection, and I will never finish painting them, and get off my back.
So to start, I said that we're tying it to D&D. So we're using this like an adventure. We're here together, we're having a session, a campaign. If you have any questions, because D&D is cooperative, ask them at any time. Please don't wait till the end, all right? We want to go through this. So we're starting out in our adventure. We have our nice party here. We have the cleric, we have the fighter, all the good stuff. And like any good adventuring group, you start in a dungeon somewhere, right? And the first thing that you look for whenever you're playing is these secret passages. How does this relate to Active Directory? Well, it's permissions, all right? Active Directory itself, believe it or not, can be secure. It's unfortunate that we as administrators have made it insecure. And part of that is because Microsoft told us to. I'm not saying that everybody said it's perfect, right? But Microsoft says you don't want your domain admins doing things. I think we all agree you don't want your domain admins doing everything with their DA creds. We see it still to this day, but they don't want you to do that. So they say delegate these rights out, give other people permissions, which is fine, you should do that. But we start seeing this thing where people with more permissions are on like less secure devices, people are doing admin from workstations, all sorts of bad things. And so we want to look at this. How hard is it for us to find those identities and move around, right? Have you given generic all, user Sally in marketing has the ability to make changes to all these groups for some unknown reason. She can do whatever she wants. Or maybe write. I can just write any attribute. I can, let's see, maybe I don't have the ability to write it, but for some reason I can change the security on it. We've seen that time and time again, where for some unknown reason, people have been granted ownership or the ability to just say, I can change security. So we become them, change that little bit of security, and suddenly now we can write anywhere. Some of my favorites, though, are a little bit further down. Kind of hard to see because there's a table in the way, but there's these things called replicating directory changes all. Anybody familiar with this permission? You see it on the MSOL account, right, when you set up and you're syncing to Azure. It basically says that I get to act like a domain controller, don't care who I am, but I can pull anything I want out of Active Directory anytime I want, like I'm a DC, including all the password hashes. So just a small thing. There's some limitations that we can have. Saying filtered set doesn't make a difference, still has the ability to do stuff. We have seen recently, Ben and I have seen where domain users, so anybody in the environment has the ability to do things like, modify a GPO at the root of the domain. A GPO lets you put policies down on Windows devices. So suddenly, at the root of the domain, I could say, you know what, my account is an administrator everywhere. It's done. Some other good ones, I've seen domain users have replicate directory changes all for some unknown reason. It is amazing what we do. But there's another permission out there that people often forget about. And I consider this passwall. Anybody know what passwall is from D&D? It literally does what it says. It's a spell that says, I know there's a wall here, but I'm going to create an opening. It's the same thing here. Adding our own computer as a user. By default, Anybody in your forest, so not just your domain, but any domain, or a domain you trust, any number of things, have the ability to add a computer to the domain. You might be thinking, why is this bad? Well, I like to say that pen testing AD is great from Linux. You can do a lot of stuff from Linux. It's better if you can do it from Windows, and if I can be part of the domain, I'm trusted, right? I get a step up above everybody else. Easy to do it, 2 ways to stop it from happening. It's because of this policy and default domain controllers that says authenticated users down there. Anybody can do this. You can also change the machine quota if you want and say 0. I've seen some people do that. Either way, it works. You get to exploit this in other ways later, which we're going to talk about during the demo, some options that you have.
Yeah, you'll start to see that, like, even if your regular domain user is locked down tight, if they have the ability to create a computer object, frequently those computer objects have a lot more permissions on the domain.
Yep. And by default, where this computer is placed is in a special location in the domain called the default computers container. It's right under the root, which means the only policies that get applied to it are at the top of your domain. And since you want your policies to kind of follow that lowest common denominator methodology, up there you typically get things like, here's your auditing, hey, here's some other light stuff that you want to affect everybody. So even if your endpoint protection on your devices is incredible, you're using CrowdStrike and you're logging everything, and we're sending PowerShell auditing everywhere. We are doing everything we possibly can. That workstation will not let you do anything. We add our own, it doesn't make a difference because we're not going to get those settings, right? Quick win to get some sort of leverage in the domain. So, pass wall, secret doors, big problem.
Secret tunnel.
Secret tunnel. I'm not going to sing it for you. Nobody wants to hear that. So next up, your DM is a mean person. You've made your way, you found that secret passage, you found the secret treasure chest, and you open it, and there's this beautiful amulet. You know it's magical because it's the only thing in the room that isn't rusted, corroded, dead, etc. You pick it up, you might look at it and say, ooh, what does it do? Cast some magic on it to see if it can tell you what it does, but it looks great, you know it's powerful, you put it on, and then suddenly you realize your GM is mean and you've been cursed, right? You can't do something now. Well, we have this problem in AD as well. And it's all because of NTLM. Everybody goes, oh, NTLM. We all know this, right? Believe it or not, NTLM is so old that what is considered the new protocol, Kerberos, is really 26 years old now. So NTLM is like 30-something plus years. It is really, really old. Kerberos is your default. But unfortunately, most people don't know how to set up Kerberos for applications in your environment. It takes a little bit of work. Developers don't know how to do it. They just expect it to work. They don't give you good documentation, and if they do, it doesn't work, and then you just do whatever. And really what happens is your apps are dropping to NTLM for free behind the scenes. You just don't know it. So NTLM is a challenge protocol, all right? So it works like this. We have our user. They've logged in already, okay? They've already doing whatever in the background. They decide to go to that application or file server. So they make the connection. Behind the scenes, that app, server, whatever, responds back with a challenge. It's some random numbers, okay? The device is very nice, and behind the scenes, takes that number, set of numbers, encrypts it with the password hash of the user, and sends it back to the application. Then the application says, all right, hey, Mr. Domain Controller, here's the person who's trying to authenticate, here's their username, here's the challenge I sent them, and here's their response. The DC, because it knows everybody's password hash, says, great, let me do the exact same encryption. And if it matches, it goes, great, let you in. Does anybody see a problem with this dynamic? Everything occurs over here, right? Yep, responds with, hey, you have access. So everything is happening over here. And we like to insert ourselves in that, pretend to be something else, so we get your password hash. To make it worse, there's a whole bunch of other problems. NTLM v2, the newest version, which was released in NT4 SP2, I think? Maybe 3, I don't know. I forget the NTS service packs. A long, long time ago, is the default. That means that at least I'm doing a little bit of extra checks. There's some randomness that's been assigned to this methodology. But by default, there's nothing enforcing it. So even though you expect NTLM v2 that has some better protections to be there, all we do is say, you know what? Let's drop us to NTLM v1. And now we have a much easier hash to deal with. We can crack it much faster. We can do all other things, right? Like drop the mic.
Yeah, so Intel MV1, with it being as old as it is, you can effectively, so whenever signing is enabled, you have this thing that's called message integrity code. That's basically like, that is where the signing verifies, like, hey, you are who you're supposed to be. Net Intel M1 will just let you drop that. And so even if you have signing enabled, it will bypass it because it like, for some reason by default, Microsoft is like, oh, you don't have your integrity code. Cool, you can go in. Like, and from there, it allows you to do, all manners of things over, frequently it's through an SMB relay to LDAP. You can do things like delegate access to another machine, do a DC sync, you can get a shadow credentials, trying to think of some other things off the top of my head.
The relay itself is beautiful, right? It's a 2-for-1. So right here, you have this wonderful thing. We said, here's my evil malicious attacker's device. We're sitting in between. Behind the scenes, because Windows trying to be helpful, that's its main purpose, let me be helpful. When you try and connect to server 1, what's happening is behind the scenes, your device is actually saying, I'm looking for something called S. Now I'm looking for SE, SER, SERV, until it matches it, so it can fill in that nice share list for people, okay? We create the poisoners, right, sitting there in the middle, and what happens is, as you're broadcasting, your device is broadcasting, we sit there and saying, that's me, that's me, that's me, yep, definitely me, and we can send it on to our actual target where that domain admin is logged in. At least they're not on their workstation, right? But they're on a server. And we hit it, and you were going to say something?
Yeah, well, I was just going to add on to your point, like sitting on the wire and listening for that traffic, that's all well and good. And if you've got users authenticating on your VLAN that have that kind of access, that's great. But you can also kind of force that authentication if you have access to an account that can perform those actions. You can coerce one of those machines to do that for you through, there's at least 3 different ones, but the one that comes to the top of my head is like with Petit Patam. You can just have that machine do actions for you. And so you don't necessarily have to wait for someone to authenticate over the wire.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, honestly, the poisoners just help us. A relay itself is a passive thing. It's just sitting there waiting, right? And when something comes along and connects to our device, we forward it on, and we just pretend and sit in the middle and send all the challenges back and forth. So a relay is passive. Poisoners let us get more people trying to connect to us. So even if you have turned off LLMNR or all of the fun things that Windows is supposed to be doing in the background, if you do something else that you're supposed to do because we security people say you should, like, vulnerability scanning on your network, or a NAC solution, that's my favorite, comes along and hits my bad device, and your NAC solution is probably running as a domain admin because you want it to be able to test your servers and your workstations, right? It comes along, it hits my device, I relay it to the target server, and now I'm an admin on that server. I've not only moved, I've escalated my privileges. It's a 2-for-1. My favorite story with this is a NAC solution, all right? We're sitting there, we're working away, the network is pretty strong, and then we noticed, oh, I got booted off the network, even though we're doing spoofing, right? Oh, I pretended to be that MAC address. We got booted off the network. Like, all right, interesting. Let me set up my relay here to that server. The NAC solution came by again, dropped me off the network. It's okay, the relay triggered. I connected yet again as a different MAC address, and my reverse shell, my shell was sitting on that remote server. It didn't make a difference. They kicked me off because I just connected again. Relays are incredible. Signing, that Ben talked about, SMB signing, LDAP signing are great and will protect you unless we drop you to NTLM v1, like Ben said. Now it doesn't make a difference. We're still in the door.
And this is especially dangerous when your domain controller supports NTLM v1, because what can every user do? Authenticate to the domain controller. And so even if you have just the lowest of privileged users, they will still have this ability to just instant DA.
Yep. And we talked about it, like offline cracking. Your NTLM v2 hash on my cracking server, which is now 4 years old and running 1080s, I think, something like that, 4 of them, will hit an NTLM v2 password in 20 hours. That's how long it's going to take me. And that's if you're like at the end. Most likely, though, you started with a letter, capitalized, right? So we can cut that down. We can do a couple more things. I'm probably going to get it about 10 hours. If we're talking NTLM v1, we're probably looking at 10 hours, maybe. If we drop you to landman, haha, we own your network anyways, it's going to be even faster, okay? And the reason this works is the default setting for everything in the domain is when a client requests this, when he makes this initial connection from the workstation to me, it's going to be, I want to use NTLM v2. And the servers are going to say, okay, great, let's do it. But I'm more than willing to accept a lower authentication method. I'm willing to do v1, not landman. We really have to do some work to get you down there, but at least NTLM v1. So what can you do? You could remove NTLM from your network. And if you do this, I want you to reach out to me because you'll be one of like 3 organizations in the world that have done it. Okay? It would be incredible, and I want to use you as a case study. And it's because it's hard, right? As I said, everything wants to use Kerberos, but nobody knows how to set it up right. And so the only thing actually using Kerberos is your default login, hopefully, and when administrators connect to systems. As soon as you talk about an application you've installed, we're probably dropping to NTLM v1, all right? So let's just say that would be a great pipe dream. Once again, if you do it, please let me know, okay?
You got a question in the back?
Ooh, great question. So it was, yep. Great. Yeah, so the question was, in incredibly hard environments, like in a STIG environment, something that's using the federal requirements, military requirements, and STIGs, will this work? Most likely not, believe it or not, because they do require it that you've enforced NTLM v2 at least, right? So probably not, this will not work. However, thinking through, no, I don't believe it. It does not say turn it off. There are, right? So we could find potentially ways of getting that hash. We wouldn't be able to relay it most likely in that environment unless they reduced it. What we will typically see is one of 2 things in an environment. A, part of it is incredibly hardened. Another part is not quite as hardened, and so we start over here and we can just pivot into that other one. The other things we'll see is they are enforcing those requirements on the servers themselves, not necessarily through a GPO or some policy, and then we can make changes to registries, we can do some things. But if you are enforcing them the right way, poisoners, things like a relay should not work. Dropping you to NTLM v1 should not work, all right? But we can still get your hash, right? If you connect to us, we can still get your hash and we can still try and crack it offline, do things like that.
And more to that point, if we were able to identify a machine that's not enforcing SMB signing, you can't do a lot of the crazy LDAP shenanigans that you can do with that NTLM v1, but you can still get code execution via the SMB relay because it will still authenticate when there's no SMB signing. And so like we can still execute code or do things like that, but at the very minimum, you can try to crack the hash.
So the better way is enforce NTLM v2. If you do the registry, it's LM compatibility level 5. You do this on all of your endpoints, and then you turn it on the DC. That's the way you go through this. Actually, I would do it on all the client workstations, then the servers, then the domain controllers. Or you can set it via GPO. So next up, who knows what a mimic is? All right, I know who my D&D players are now. Awesome.
Is anyone a mimic in here?
Yeah, ooh, good question. Yeah. So a mimic, if you're not familiar, is something that looks enticing, right, but is actually something waiting to eat you, like our adventurers right here. This happens in Active Directory in a slightly different way. I talked about Kerberos before, the way you actually want to be authenticating, because it's all point to point. I like to think about Kerberos as passports, okay? They're tickets. So you have your passport, you go to, through customs, you go to the front, you give them your passport, they look at it, and they look at you, and then they say, okay, great, have entry. They didn't actually go back to the US and say, hey, is this guy really here? Is this valid? I trusted where this passport came from, so I trust you. Kerberos is the same way. So down here behind Ben is my poor person who's already logged in. When you connect to a Kerberos-enabled app, what happens is, for free, behind the scenes, your workstation is sending your identity, your passport, it's called a TGT, a special type of Kerberos ticket, to the domain controller. It verifies that that TGT is still good, and some other checks, are you allowed to log in still, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you are, it creates a service ticket. A service ticket is encrypted with the password hash of whatever is running the application, okay? Could be a user account, could be a workstation, could be any number of things. That ticket is then sent for free to the application you're trying to access, and because it has its password, it can decrypt the ticket and look at it and say, okay, this is Eric, he wants to come access me, great. If you've turned on excessive Kerberos checking, which no one ever has, it actually reaches back out to the DC and says this is true, but really it just trusts it like a passport. And if everything is good, it says, yes, you can enter, and whatever permissions you have. Kerberos is all about validating your identity, okay? But it's all point to point, right? Because it's encrypted with that password, things like that. So I can't, this application could not send this ticket somewhere else to access something, which is a problem. There's this idea, I learned about it called the Kerberos double hop, but it's called Kerberos delegation. This is used for applications that are reaching out to a third source, like, a database server. And instead of using the service account for the application, they actually want to become you to do it, okay? I need to know your permissions so I can access this special set. So multi-tiered. And what happens is it allows that application to pretend to be you, to impersonate you. It can do it in a couple of different ways. The really bad way is this unconstrained one. This is released with Windows 2000. It's really bad. It literally gets your identity when you log into it. It becomes you. Literally, it is you. And so if we can get that application, we are you, to do anything you could do, least secure. And then we get some other ones here, constrained, which is better. It can say, I can pretend to be you to do specific things. Recently, when I say recently, we're now talking 13 years, 2012 R2, 2012, there's this new idea of resource-based constrained delegation. Because Kerberos is really important to Active Directory, all of these upper ones require that you have domain admin privileges to turn it on a system, to allow it to occur. This is the reverse. They said, okay, that's way too tough. People aren't doing this right. Let's try this. And resource-based constrained delegation says, if you have permissions, like we showed at the beginning, right, those secret doors, to write to specific attributes on this object, you can now delegate and pretend to be somebody to access you. Okay, so it's all about permissions. It's different the other way, so it acts in reverse. So you say, here is a server, and this user ID can impersonate other people to access you, or this other server can pretend to be you. So we're going to talk about that last one. How can you become a mimic in the environment? Well, if permissions are set badly, or we have the ability to coerce your domain controller and lower itself down to like that V1, NTLM V1, we just create our new computer account out there, right? And because the DCs have permission to themselves, they have full control, so we can modify that special attribute down here called, I don't even want to say it so long, but MSDS allowed to act on behalf of other identity. That's the attribute. It can add itself in there. And so then we just say when we are going to connect to that remote system, in this case we're going to say DC, I'm going to pretend when I log in using this third-party application that can delegate me, I'm not Eric anymore. I'm going to pick somebody in the environment, anybody in that domain, and say I'm actually them, and it will forward it on for us without a problem. And when we connect to that server where this delegation has been turned on, we are that person. All right? So all it takes is having some special rights on that computer object in AD. Full control, of course, will work. The ability to write to any attribute will work. The ability to, once again, change security. If I can say I have read access, but I can give myself write access, I can do it. Or write account restrictions. I said we could coerce a DC. Once again, drop it to entity in v1. Ben mentioned Petit Patin before, but there are other wonderful tools in here that we could use to do the exact same thing. It doesn't make a difference. We just ask the DC to please give me its hash so we can do something. You want to say?
Oh, no, I was going to say just a small caveat, something I'd forgotten about. For the resource-based constrained delegation, for that, in order for that to be exploitable, you have to have control of something with a service principal name attached to it. So a service account, or we mentioned this earlier, a computer account. And so the ability to create that computer account, suddenly you're able to do this on machines, and you're not a DA at that point because, well, as far as the machine is concerned, you're a DA, but you're not actually on, like, it's in the context of that machine itself. It's not the entire domain, if that makes sense.
Yep, great point. So yes, when we connect, whatever that delegation has been granted to, we can become anybody to affect that thing. That thing is very generic because it could be anything. It could be a computer. It could be a specific app. So thinking about our pen testing, quite often we'll see this delegation put in place for, once again, accessing a database, okay? So being a domain admin and accessing a database may not do anything, but I can find out who your DBAs are, who probably have database owner, and gain their level of access to hit that database server, where then I spawn XB command shell or something else and start pivoting around that way, right? You can become anybody. It's just a matter of knowing who you want to become at that specific time. Yay. So now we get to see a demo here. Ben's going to show us how you do this. I'm going to switch you over.
We're able to like dual screen this, so I don't have to. Sure. I guess I could just use the cache on it. Because I was going to have the Cali one up there, and then I was going to have the cheat sheet right here.
Oh. There, sorry.
It'll work that way. Yeah, it'll be fine. They'll just see my cheat sheet. Okay. So in our lab example here, and make sure everybody can hear me okay, we have a domain that's called elementalevil.com.
A good call out back to if anybody plays D&D.
We have a user by the name of Morty Kuehn who wants to do bad things. And so I am lazy and going to use the cache on this Kali box, so I'm not sorry. So we are going to first demonstrate one on our domain controller, DC1. We are not going to have the proper permissions to delegate access. So we have our same account name for our domain controller, DC1. We're going to read the ACL on it, and then these are our credentials for our user. So you will see here that this really long attribute that I can't say without going blah, 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 is empty. And so if we try to do anything on the domain controller right now as this user, nothing happens. You'll get access denied, logon failure. And so now we want to, we find out through whatever means, bloodhounds, you're just messing around the network, whatever. You find out that Morty, for some reason, has write permissions on the domain controller object. We don't know why. And so, knowing that we can create our own machine, Morty has created his own machine called Simulacrum here. And so now we are going to write to this permission that Simulacrum can act as anyone else on the domain controller. And so we're just going to hit enter here. And so accounts allowed to act on behalf of other identity, we have simulacrum. So now we're going to request a service ticket, but it's going to be a little bit different because we're not going to request that ticket as Morty. We're going to request it as our computer account simulacrum. And so you'll see here, my right or your right?
There you go.
Here, just work. Oh, okay. How's this? There we go. Sorry about that. So you'll see here we're requesting a ticket for the CIFS service, which I'm not sure on the specifics.
File sharing.
File share, okay. And then for our alternate service, we're going to request a ticket for LDAP, which will allow us to do a DC sync on the domain controller. Without that LDAP service ticket, you won't be able to do this. So now we get a bunch of errors about Python stuff, but we've got our service ticket. So now we're going to export that into our Kerberos cache here. So now anything that we do through Kerberos is going to be done as our DA. And so now we're going to try this secret stump again when I get there. So now we have similar output here. We're going to authenticate as the DA right here. But we're authenticating over Kerberos with no password because you don't need it. You got a Kerberos ticket. And so we hit enter. And we get a weird error, but because, we didn't make a sacrifice to the demo gods.
No, not enough chicken.
But as you can see here, we've dumped all the hashes on the domain controller. And so now I can just grab one of these Intel M hashes and be who I want to be. And so we've got a DA here by the name of L Morninglord. I could just get his Intel M hash here and just basically own the domain at that point. I can look for whatever I want on the file shares, control other servers, burn it down, whatever.
Yep. Because once again, Microsoft being helpful, we don't need to know your password if we can get this hash. This is the password hash in AD that you use, what it uses to do all of the fun things behind the scene, right? So in this case, we had write access to a domain controller, which may or may not actually occur, but as we've said, if we can coerce your DC into talking back to us, we can have the DC be able to write to itself, or another DC, right? So it is a little contrived because hopefully no user has the ability to write to a domain controller attribute, but we could do this if we wanted to access, once again, that server the domain admin is logged into, right? We just jumped the shark all the way over to domain controllers, but we can pivot. We find out where you're logged in using things like Bloodhound or other recon, other methods, and see where you are and just become you there. All right? So how can we find these mimics? A whole bunch of things. And believe it or not, all of these are really bad to run on a domain, FYI, except for the first one. When you're looking in Active Directory to find things, you all want to use index attributes like a database. Most of these aren't indexed, which means if you have a large environment, it's actually going to be bad. It's going to cause some problems. So what I typically do is I say, give me all the computers in your environment with these other attributes aside with it when you give me the output. And I get a nice list. But if you're going to go quick and dirty, you can run each one of these individually. So we're going to look for our resource-based constrained delegation because most people aren't using this one. Almost everybody uses these up here. So this looks odd in most places. And say, let us find where people have the ability to impersonate others. But you can use any one of these to find where Kerberos impersonation can occur. How do you prevent yourself from being eaten by the mimic? All right. Well, number one, know where Kerberos delegation is. As I mentioned before, Kerberos delegation is a valid thing to occur. It should be happening in your environment for specific apps. You just want to be sure that it's locked down and you know where it is, so you aren't logging into those devices with your administrative credentials, your domain admins, et cetera. So know where they are so you know how to handle them. To protect yourself, all of your really big administrative accounts like domain admins, server admins, et cetera, should either be marked as insensitive and cannot be delegated, but that's individually on each object. It's a special attribute in ADUC that you can click on. Or you can use my favorite, protected users group. Does anybody know what this group is? Is anybody using this group? I see a couple hands. If you are not using this group, your domain admins should be a member of this group. Your server admin should be a member of this group, as long as they don't log into apps, okay? So we're talking actually logging into a Windows box to do things. This puts so many restrictions on what it can and cannot do. It will work for Windows stuff, no problem. It makes our lives really, really hard when we want to try and use the account. But it does things like it won't accept NTLM authentication. It cannot have its tickets, Kerberos tickets, impersonated. It can only have a certain lifetime on tickets, all sorts of things that are wonderful improvements. But because it cannot use NTLM v2 or any NTLM authentication, it can't log into other apps, most likely, all right? So have separate accounts, but put them in that group. It does what the second one here does, but a lot more. It's a lot better. So in summary, we've gone through our small adventure. Our poor adventure has been beaten up by the horrible GM, but they survived. How can we do this? We need to know who has the ability to write to things in AD. Not only who has that ability, but where they're logging in, okay? It should be done on special devices. That's getting better, but quite often we see, once again, people who have domain admin and server admins and maybe workstation admins and people with other rights all logging onto one jump box. So that becomes the target, and it's not as protected as your domain controller. Guaranteed, it's not. So we just go there. So know who's logging in where. Best tools for that, still, Bloodhound is probably great if you're familiar with how to use it. Avalanche is a close second. Pingcastle kind of does it, but not as good. It's more of an auditing tool. I have some scripts that will give you at least OU level permissions, not individual objects, but know who has the ability to write and where. Enforce NTLM v2. If you have not done this yet, please go through the process. Everything at this point should be using NTLM v2 on their own. It shouldn't be a problem. You might have some old stuff. Once again, force all of your clients. They're already trying to use NTLM v2. Force all the clients to 5, then do your servers, then do your domain controllers. You should not see a big impact there. And then lastly, be aware of that Kerberos delegation. It should be there in your environment. Domain controllers, by the way, need to be able to delegate, right? So you're going to see your domain controllers always come up as, hey, we can do unconstrained delegation. Don't turn that off. You turn that off and your domain's going to stop working, right? So that's appropriate. Just know what other member servers are using that permission, all right? Anything you want to add, Ben?
Just to add to the thing about the DCs, with the enforcing NTLM v2, you cannot turn off the delegation on a DC, and so supporting older versions of NTLM, that's why that is so bad on a DC. It's just, anybody can delegate to it. So that's just, yeah, the nature of the beast, I guess. That's why you should, at minimum, be enforcing NTLM v2
Absolutely.
on your DCs.
Everywhere, but definitely on the DCs.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, sir. No, I love questions. The Kali box? It could have lived anywhere, right? As long as we have line of sight to the domain controller, it could live anywhere. Preferably, yeah, no, because we're saying this account has the ability to do it. So,
yeah.
As long as it has line of sight network-wise to a domain controller, we're good.
Yeah, if it's sitting on a Wi-Fi network that's not segregated from the domain, then yeah. I used Impacket on Kali just as a kind of ease of use kind of thing, but there's also the popular tool Rubius that you can use on PowerShell through a Windows workstation. So you can, if you want to use like an assume breach, you can also go from that perspective of, hey, I've got a threat actor on this workstation that can execute PowerShell. So I debated using that, but just for the purposes of the demo, I did unpack it. Okay. Bloodhound.
Sorry, so the first question that we answered was, what type of network access do you need? Right, where on the network do you need to be to make this work? And so anywhere, really. The second question was? Discovery? Discover that we've abused it, or discover that it's possible? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, to detect the actual, you'd be looking for the behaviors of us trying to initiate creating a computer account, modifying permissions in AD, which nobody is really ever auditing, or running commands in the background. Seeing the ticket be created would only be done by the domain controller, and that's if you're auditing service tickets. And if you are, your domain controller is burning on fire because of how much is going on, all right? It's literally in flames in your data center. So seeing the actual us become somebody, very, very hard to see it unless you look for those commands. Any other questions?
Yeah, so the credential that you had for Morgan Kuehn, so you'd achieve that by cracking a hash you got from responder or packet capture or...
Yeah, yes.
Those lines.
Dark web monitoring, phishing, we asked you for it. We asked your help desk to reset your password for us. Any number of ways that we got a set of credentials.
Okay, and so that particular portion of the attack does require a compromised account.
It does, because we said this user is going to make this change, right? So yes, it requires some form of credentials, which could be achieved through poisoning, relays, other methods where we don't have credentials, right? So yes, it requires a valid identity in your forest or trusted domains or any number of places, right? A lot of people forget that as soon as you have an identity in an Active Directory forest, if you trust it, I have permissions everywhere. We see this wonderful thing where we have this lockdown domain, and we have a root domain, and then we have this other domain out here that we pretend that doesn't exist because some people are administrating it, right? Some other group. We start down here, we have access to everything again. We have read access at least, potentially write access in other places.
You had a lot of great commands in there, like all those git commands and things. Is there a way that you could share that with the group? Or?
Oh, absolutely. So number one, email me or Ben. We don't believe in charging you by the second, minute, day, whatever. I love answering questions. Our true philosophy at Secure Ideas is we want to work ourselves out of a job. I would much prefer that my kids' information was secure and safe than me doing what I do. I love being a pen tester, but I can do something else, right? I hate that my kids' data has been leaked like 14 times, various ways already, and they're just getting into college, okay? So really bad. So email me. I will send you the slide deck. I will be happy to talk to you about AD. Ben will be more than happy to talk to you about any of this stuff.
I always like to say when I'm on a pen test, I always like to say when I'm on a pen test, like when I run into this kind of stuff and things are locked down, I'm like, well, this is boring for me, but that's great for you guys. Like sometimes I like saying that. Other times I'm like, ugh, give me something to play with. But anyway.
So, was there another? Yes, sir.
Y'all offer third-party services, I guess?
Are
y'all internal to like an organization?
No. We are a security consulting firm. Security has been around for 15 years. Come talk to me afterwards. We'll be happy to set that up, right? But yes, absolutely. Any other questions? Anything about AD. It doesn't even need to be what we talked about. Or pen testing. All right, if not, thank you very much for listening to us talk. Hopefully you had a good adventure. We'll be around.